you know, I'm a researcher. I can just talk to myself, for myself. I early on learned how to do research, how to publish, how to communicate results at conferences and scientific papers. But how to make best use of this science-based knowledge? How can science-based knowledge be translated into policy and practices to improve for the smallholder farmers and increase food security? So science-based solutions that promote sustainable agricultural productivity and improve access to inputs, technology, and markets can significantly enhance productivity and resilience among smallholder farmers. So we believe within the AgriFoSe program, by utilizing a knowledge co-creation approach, building networks between researchers, policymakers, and practitioners at local and regional level, we can develop context-specific solutions that are grounded in local knowledge and expertise. Local knowledge and expertise. That is a key, because there are so many skilled researchers, stakeholders, politicians, and farmers that need to meet and co-create this new knowledge to improve food security. And currently, the AgriFoSe program, we support 17, that's amazing, 17 different projects in sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia. And you, Cecilia, you mentioned the COVID. We haven't been able to meet in person before. So this is the first time all teams, all 17 teams meet. And it's been very valuable to learn from each other and discuss how to move forward, and especially how to make this sustainable. Because there will come one day when there's no more funding from AgriFoSe. And of course it should be like that. There should be no program that keeps running year after year after year. So how make our work sustainable? In the projects, for you, individual researchers, what you've learned from this program, and also on university level and other institutions where we also collaborate. So by saying that, it's time to show a film. I'm sorry, we do not have any popcorn and soft drinks to offer you. But we will show a short film of the AgriFoSe program.
In a world where the challenges of food security are as diverse as the landscapes themselves, a group of visionaries is sowing the seeds of change to achieve zero hunger, as outlined in Sustainable Development Goal number 2. Embedded in these endeavors is the core of AgriFoSe2030's approach, is use of the theory of change framework, which promotes critical thinking and learning and unpacks and challenges the assumptions about how change happens seamlessly, coupled with robust monitoring, evaluation, and a continuous learning framework.
So this program is funded by Sweden, by SIDA. And we have been working with this program for quite many years now. So the aim of this program is to link science-based knowledge into policy and practices, to make sure that the knowledge that is produced at academic institutes and universities come into use by farmers and practices. And the goal of this program is making better use of science.
The trends are showing that since actually 2014, the productivity and production of key food security crops has been actually fluctuating hugely. We decided that we need to bring together all the stakeholders and talk together in dialogues and see how to transform the agriculture sector. And we sat together and went through the theory of change together, because we want to use model farmers as our platform for change.
This model lays the groundwork for sustainable change through projects that harness local knowledge and science.
We have done a lot of studies with a variety of insect species that are edible. We found out that in terms of the protein content, it ranges from 30% to around 69% on dry matter basis. Then we go on antioxidants. We are quite excited. Our studies have shown that termites and as well as the edible stink bugs, they have high levels of antioxidants.
By engaging different strategic community stakeholders, projects are able to share knowledge and co-create to support improved policies and practices for a sustainable food system.
So this project comes in to create a space, a platform where different stakeholders can work together, including the farm at the center, but also in collaboration with the local leaders, the politicians, the technical planning committees, as well as other engagements like the media.
I had an opportunity to work with the AgriFoSe team members in implementing a project here in Kenya. This was under the social and economic dimensions of smallholder agriculture and food security. We collaborated with the University of Nairobi, the Mazingira Institute, and county governments of Kiambu, Nakuru, and Kisumu in implementing this project.
One of the key issues we would like to transform and help farmers with is agroecological practices that contribute to intensified food crop production on parkland.
Ongoing monitoring and evaluation tools keep each project agile, ensuring that they remain relevant and effective. AgriFoSe also offers different courses that build capacity of researchers and other stakeholders to synthesize, analyze, and communicate science to influence policy and practice.
We also were able to attend courses at Uppsala, at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and these courses were based on theory of change, which is what we also needed in terms of technology transfer from our side.
I found out about the course when I got an email from the AgriFoSe challenge leader, Madeleine.
This course has been very interesting.
I think the course meets my expectations.
The AgriFoSe program also offers a systematic review course with the aim of acquainting researchers with theory and practice in systematic review work.
As a university, we realize that our postgraduate students and our researchers need to get skills to enable them conduct effective research using systematic literature reviews by itself as an independent research, or just to support them when they are developing their proposals for the rest of research, especially postgraduate students. And therefore we felt the need to have this course so that we can empower our researchers to do this kind of reviews in an effective manner.
With every project and every change story, we move closer to a world without hunger.
When AgriFoSe came in, it has now created a link that between the farmers, we had known each other, and as now, right now, we are now sharing our common goals.
In total, 11 farmer groups have been established, and also we have the member 119 members that contribute and working in our group.
We'd like to thank AgriFoSe for giving us an opportunity to facilitate technology transfer to these farmers.
There is hope for a brighter and more sustainable future, and AgriFoSe 2030 is leading the way.
So I'm Joseph Karugia. I'm with the International Livestock Research Institute, an agricultural economist by training. And these days I work a lot on livestock policy analysis. In the past, I have worked on a number of issues, especially around the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, supporting countries in the implementation of that program. AgriFoSe asked me to talk about capacity development for the attainment of SDG 2, Sustainable Development Goal 2 on ending hunger, and also linking that to African Union Agenda 2063. Yeah. And Sophia has already given a couple of my slides. So, and I noticed that I initially had 30 minutes, so I now have 20. I have to figure out how to compress my comments, but I will do that. Can you put it up? So we are in the middle of the implementation of the Agenda 2030, isn't it? Because 7 years to go. It was supposed to be a 15-year agenda. And as we have been told, we are not on track to achieve most of the SDGs, including SDG 2. Yet, we do know also that food systems hold the key to the achievement of Agenda 2030. All the SDGs are actually linked to SDG 2 and food systems, right? They are the key to ending poverty, protecting the planet, ensuring that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. You can see the 4 Ps, right? People, planet, prosperity, and peace. And of course, in the SDG agenda, we have partnerships. And similarly, in Agenda 2063, partnerships is important because we can't move this agenda unless we work together globally up to the local level. Next, please. I show this slide just to show that Agenda 2063, which was developed a few months before the Agenda 2030, aligns very well with the 2030 agenda. So indeed, the African Union contributed a lot to the development of the Agenda 2030, and up to 90% alignment, right? There are some areas, of course, African Confederation or Federation and African Cultural Renaissance that are not in Agenda 2030. Next. And as we have said, SDG 2, food systems are particularly critical for SDG 2. We know, I think, what it is about: ending hunger, achieving food security, and improved nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture. And that aligns with goal number 1 of Agenda 2063, which is a high standard of living, quality of life, and well-being of all citizens, and modern agriculture for increased productivity and production. And there are efforts to try and track these different agendas using the same indicators. So if I show the SDG 2 indicators, you get a sense of how well we are also doing on Agenda 2063. And this is what Sophia just mentioned. Go to the next one. One of the indicators, an important one, is the issue of prevalence of undernourishment. And you can see only a few regions, a few countries are close not achieved the target, close to the target, right? For Africa, a good number of countries far from the target, and a large number of them, especially in the Eastern African and Southern African region, are very far from the target. And what's even more worrying is that the trend is deteriorating, right? Look at Africa, deterioration. So instead of improving, things are getting worse. Next, the second indicator is the one on, next, the food insecurity. And again, many countries in our region and South America far or very far from the target, and again, the situation is deteriorating. You can get this information from the SDG indicator tracking data or data portal. Next. The last indicator, there are several indicators, of course. I'm showing only a few, right? This is the one on maintenance of biodiversity. And again, some progress, right, in terms of preservation of genetic resources, growing at a rate of about 1% year on year. So that's not too bad. But again, we're very far from achieving the target that was set. That's all I'm going to say about the indicators. Next. What I said is that things are getting worse, but in the recent years, they have even become worse, right? The drivers of food insecurity, if we look at the key drivers, climate extremes, droughts, floods, etc. In Kenya, we came from COVID, locusts, drought. Now we have floods. And they become more frequent, right? Conflicts, right? The Ukraine-Russia conflict, the current one, Israel-Hamas, but also in African countries, we have conflicts in Ethiopia, in Nigeria, in other countries as well. And these shocks, such as COVID, cause economic slowdowns and even downturns. 2020, 2021, in fact, often occur in combination, right? And they precipitate what we are seeing, high or rising food prices, prices of inputs going up, fertilizers going up, fuel, energy, and so on, okay? And that's why we are seeing the rollback in progress in key food security and nutrition indicators. We are worse off now than we were in 2019. So 2020, 2021, things went down. 2022, things started improving, but we are still below where we were 2019. Okay, next. So what is needed? Nothing new here. We have talked about food systems transformation, but I think the important point to make here is the urgency of now looking at the food systems, transforming how food systems function, how we consume and produce food, and bring in the systems thinking, right? There are different components of the food system, from the supply chains to the food environment to consumer behavior, and how all these interact to produce the results that we are seeing. And that, you know, food is not about agriculture. It's related to virtually everything. It's the inputs, the actual production on farms, the distribution, the retail, but also the policies, the economic well-being of individuals. Can they afford the food? Can they access it? And also, what informs the choices that consumers make? And how can we influence those choices, yeah? And all these interact together to produce these 4 domains of impact areas: nutrition and health, sustainability, resilience, and production, or productive domain. And all these have to be inclusive, taking account of everybody: women, youth, the marginalized, and all that. And see the centrality of policy, research, and extension, and how we can, through policy, through research, through extension, we can and we do influence the different components, and therefore the interactions between the different components. Next. One of the things that I think we've been talking about it, but again, it's gaining currency, it's much more important now, is that we need to shift the way policy decisions are made. Decision-making needs to be informed by the latest scientific and technical evidence. If you look at the development, the SDGs, and even the food systems transformation agenda, not everything is working in or reinforcing each other, right? We have to think about the trade-offs. We have to think about what comes first so that we can get the biggest bang for the investments that we make. And importantly, as Sophia said, the local context. We can't have all, how do you put it? One size fits all, right? The local context is absolutely important, that we are tailoring solutions to the local context. And therefore, we need to enhance science and research capacities, especially at the national and local level. Next. How do we do that? Strengthen research cooperation between scientific communities and indigenous people's knowledge communities. Sophia mentioned that we are ignoring a wealth of knowledge that already exists. The indigenous, the people in their own localities, they have co-evolved, if you like, right? The food systems have evolved with the environment in which they live. And that knowledge has to be exploited to the full. Of course, the usual, we need to spend more on research, and we have to strengthen the relationship, the link between policy making and the science. And that needs to be built around networks, local networks, but also linking those local networks to the international networks as well. And this is where you can see why a program like AgriFoSe is playing a critical role. Linking, networking. I have been involved, as I said, in establishing a network of scientists and policymakers here in Kenya, working together with the University of Nairobi. And you can see bringing different disciplines together in an interdisciplinary way, networking them with policymakers, but also linking, of course, with the international colleagues in the South, but also in the North. Okay, next. Locally generated capacity is the best. If we are actually going to sustainably co-create with the people, the clients that we are working for, the policymakers, the farmers, we have to work together. We have to build local, generate local capacity. And build this around, as we said, the networks, working with the decision makers, the practitioners, and having dialogues, platforms to dialogue about policy, about practice, and so on. But we need capacity at 3 different levels. I think AgriFoSe has done well, especially around the individual level, right? Building the capacity of individuals, but we know that they won't go very far if the institutional capacity doesn't exist. The facilities to do research, the incentive to research, but also translate it into policy and practice. And I'm pleased we have representatives from universities here. We need to look at the incentives here. Do we really reward scientists for engaging with policymakers, for example? A few minutes to talk about my experience in engaging with the policy or trying to work on this interface between science and policy. And as we have seen, science needs to be at the table, but science needs to have something to offer, right? Not just, claim a spot at the table unless you have something to offer. You have the science, but science is not what's going to deliver the right policies, the right practices, isn't it? We need to do more. And literature is full of advice on how to do this, so that's nothing new. I think the issue is how do we manage the tensions, how do we manage the inconsistencies in that advice? Very good advice. Next. For example, it says, let's do high quality research. You can't argue with that. Communicate it well, you can't argue with that. Involve policymakers in your research, that's what we are asked to do, right? Act as a knowledge broker, I put a question mark, you'll see why. Build networks, again, that's what we have been saying. That's what we're doing with other researchers, policymakers, funders, advocacy partners. Next. But there are inconsistencies. High quality research, I can go to the lab, break down the molecule, and that's good research, right? But policy relevant research, that's a different kettle. Yeah? How do we influence policy, right? What really influences policy? Research is important, but there are other competing factors. And there's a difference between political time, what I call political time, policy time, and research time. The politicians want to make decisions now, right? And they will, whether it's the son or the grandmother who provides, they will make those decisions. Policy time, yeah, it takes some time, but researchers are saying, give me a little more time, right? And the metrics of the high quality research are very different. At the university level, publish or perish, right? Policy relevant, sometimes it's not the precision of the parameter, but sometimes it's just the direction, right? In Kenya, for example, we have this debate about the tax policy. I haven't seen our economists, come and say, don't go this way or go this way because go the way you are going because it's right? Or don't go in the opposite direction because it's going to fail, right? We need that kind of research that actually informs decisions, because decisions are going to be made whether there is enough evidence or not. Next. But the message, if it's not the right message the politician or the decision maker wants to hear, you're in trouble, right? You have to tailor the message to the audience. The messenger, the researcher might not be the best person to deliver the message. How do you build those networks to actually get the message? The channels, is it the media? Is it a policy brief? Is it a dialogue? What works best? And it depends on what you're working on, isn't it? And importantly, and researchers worry about this, reputation. So you don't want to give a policy option and it turns out that it's wrong, especially if you're you haven't actually completed your research project. But you have to be entrepreneurial, right? Take some risks, yeah? But also guard against your credibility and also building trust. So it means it's not something you do. Next, it's not something you do after you have completed your study and then you go away and do another one for 6 years and come back and want to engage with the policymaker. We talk about involving policymakers in your research. Important. So you need to understand the policymaking process itself, but the framing of issues sometimes differs between the scientists and the policymakers. For example, you might want a longer-term view if you're thinking about issues of climate change, issues of food insecurity and so on, versus very short-term agenda. Politicians want to do something now, right? They can't just sit there, even if the long-term objective is good, and make decisions that hurt their constituents. For example, food export bans, we know they are bad, but the government will get a flack if indeed allows, for example, exports of food when their own citizens are dying. So policy versus politics. Policy is never neutral, right? And you have to be conscious of the different interest groups, right? So you ask yourself, do we want evidence-based policy or do we want evidence-informed politics? Next. Yeah, building networks. We have said this is important, but the default usually is competition. Collaboration, we know the benefits, but we really don't want to. The incentives for competition seem to overweigh the benefits that we get for collaboration. That could be between researchers, institutions, and so on. And you've seen many grants that say, you compete. The word is compete, right? Interest-based or evidence-based advocacy partners, these are going to be very different to engage, depending on whether it's interest-based, for example, the issue of biotechnology, right? Some people are just no, right? Whether the evidence says otherwise, right? And evidence-based could be strong, but sometimes you don't have the sufficient passion, the passion that the interest-based interests have, right? Groups have, is very different from those of us that want to provide evidence. You say, yeah, I have the evidence, take it or leave it, right? These guys push. Institutional versus individual interest. The the decision makers, for example, the bureaucracy, they have incentives and constraints, as we said, that informs the way they take your research evidence, right? You can have discussions about multi-stakeholder platforms where you try to manage the different groups. And actually, this works quite well, right, for certain decisions, where one dominant party, for example, government, is actually checked by other partners, right? The civil society, even development partners in developing countries, for example. Sometimes you can choose champions. I remember the African Union appointed a former Prime Minister of Ethiopia as the CADEP champion when he was Prime Minister. A few years later, he was not Prime Minister anymore. So, well, you can call him and say, bring back. He still, I think, is Stephen, isn't it? He still is the champion, but he doesn't have the clout that he had before. There are issues of regional versus national interests, and you can put SDGs here, right? That it's not a straightforward matter to move from the regional, from the global SDGs, and bring them and actually have all of them as spelled out, adopted at country level. We see this in, for example, in trade discussions. I use the example of common external tariffs. COMESA, not too long ago, was trying to bring in a common external tariff, and then member countries are asked to provide lists of sensitive and special products. And everything in agriculture was there, right? Beneficial, working with funders, great. AgriFoSe probably depends on CEDA. If CEDA's interests change, right? It's good as long as it lasts, isn't it? But if their interests change, you're in trouble. And of course, we know about use or misuse of research, where if the research doesn't support my point, it's useless. Eh? Or sometimes you can say, we're not going to make a decision yet because we're doing research on that issue, right? And that buys you time to do the things you want to do. So you see actors that are interested in playing the game, working together, but everybody wants to change the rules to suit their own interests. I talked about advocacy. Scientists, in many cases, don't want to actually to be advocates, because advocates means you choose a position and push it. They want to be honest brokers, provide policy options. But sometimes the policy makers themselves actually want to be given the action to take, right? So to make. Okay, next. And I think I've talked about this. What constitutes success in policy engagement? Do you inform? Do you influence? Policymakers are responsible for the decisions they make, and usually if it works, it's their decision, right? If it fails, oh, it's because I got this advice from this university and so on. So we have to develop metrics of success, of course, comes back to the theory of change of AgriFoSe and other similar programs. Okay, I think finally we can conclude that we need concerted efforts, the partnerships that we talk about in SDGs, in Agenda 2063, to really deliver, because we are running out of time. Science has a role, and enhancing the capacity of scientists to actually translate their science to policy, to practice, is an imperative for us to get, to make progress. And policy engagement is a career choice. So, Professor Mande, if you don't align the incentives accordingly, they will come to AgriFoSe, they will be trained, and they go back to doing the things that they have been doing. So we need to invest in the required skills and all around. That's not just of the scientists, but actually of the policymakers or decision makers themselves as well, to use the evidence, yeah? And it requires time and resources. My colleagues used to say, let's be persistent, let's be present, and that you won't do unless you are in the area where you're working, and be patient, because politicians change direction really quickly. The agenda is very fluid. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And so now I'd like to invite Professor Eli Katunguka from Champogo University to take us through the role of universities and researchers in translating science to policy and practice. Welcome, Prof.
So I recognize all of you and welcome you to this meeting, this workshop. And I thank AgriFoSe for bringing us together, all of us in the same room, to speak together. My name is Katunguka Rwachishaya. That's a long name. You can call me Eli or call me Eli. I come from Champogo University, where I've been the Vice Chancellor for the last 9 years. But before that, I worked in Makerere University for 34 years. And most of that time, I was the Director of Research and Graduate Training, and I was coordinating the CEDA project for about 9 years. And we had a lot of money from CEDA, giving us close to $25 million for a period of 5 years. By and large, that was substantial funding. So I've been asked to speak about the role of universities and researchers in translating science to policy and practice. Universities worldwide have 3 major functions: to teach, to conduct research, and to engage in outreach activities with the communities. And to do this, they get their funding from government, if it's a public institution, and from other sources. And most times when we have been trying to push for research funding, Joseph talked about funding research in universities, we've been challenged by the politicians to show the relevance of university research. They challenge us, we give you money for research, but we don't see the impact of the research that you do. There is this common belief that there is a lot of research in universities which is sitting on the shelves and is not out in the communities to serve the purpose. So universities have a role to turn this negative narrative to say that research from universities can be used to inform policy and cause some change, social change. Research comes from universities and from other research institutions, because it's the whole research landscape. And for a long time, universities have been doing research. But what type of research do we do? Most people in the universities do research for their academic progression. This is what Joseph talked about. Publish or perish. In the past, you had to publish. If you don't publish, you don't grow. From your lecture level to senior lecture level to professor level. So that most researchers in universities have been caught in that belief that the research we do is for publishing, for dissemination at international conferences and national conferences, for writing books. That's what counts. We in administration in universities, these days universities are ranked depending on how many professors you have. To become a professor, you must publish. You must do research and write papers in peer-reviewed journals, in high-impact journals. So this new thinking of research for informing policy, I think has come at a time when we've been talking about the role of universities in national development. So what's the role of universities in informing policy that causes national development? And in doing this, we must know, we must clearly state the purpose of the research you are doing. I know policy research can also be translated into a paper, but maybe most likely not in a high-impact journal, because it may not be that of high impact. But in order for your research to benefit communities, you must identify the problem you want to work on with the communities, with their participation, so that you generate their interest right from the beginning and not bombard them with your research findings when they don't know how it came about, and then it will be rejected. So we have found that where research has informed policy, that has been a result of identifying the problem you want to work on with the communities. And in order to inform policy, you must understand the policy development landscape. I think you need to understand how these things work in each country. It is not one fits all, as he said, as Joseph said. each country has got their own peculiar way of doing things. For example, we all talk about politicians, and in many cases, these are members of parliament, MPs, as we call them. In Uganda, MPs last 5 years. And by the end of the 5 years, when we have fresh elections, about 80% of them don't come back. They are defeated. So one time when I was in Makerere under the CEDA program, also to encourage policy development, we put in an element of writing policy briefs for the politicians. Maybe 1 or 2 pages. If it's big, 3 pages. They don't have time to read. So I went and approached one of the members of parliament, who was the chairperson of the Science Committee of Parliament, with the view of trying to find out what he may want us to do in the university so that they may be interested in what comes out of the university. And I put it quite clear to him. Makerere University has been doing research for many years, but we don't see any politician, we don't see anybody interested in what comes out of the university. The guy was very honest with me. He said, I work on 5-year cycles. So he asked me a simple question. What is it that you are doing that will ensure that I will be re-elected next round? So they must understand, they must have improved their skills in how to write policy briefs, how to write other forms of communication to reach out to their stakeholders. So in most cases, the policies related to agriculture in our countries are top-down. They originated from the top to the bottom. And sometimes they don't listen to what information or evidence is coming from the lower levels. Yesterday, I was intrigued by the number of projects AgriFoSe is involved in, 17 of them. And I took particular interest in some of them which are doing work on improving nutrition through insects, having nutrition improved through increasing access to these insects. In Uganda, we have a number of insects which are very nutritious. But we have a head of state who believes in not eating small things. The guy does not eat chicken, he doesn't eat fish, he doesn't like piggery, because he comes from the cattle keeping communities. And those people don't go around eating birds. If you want to eat, you must eat a cow. You kill a bull and eat it. And sometimes the policies in our countries, they come from that level down. But you can reach a number of people with your research, because we have districts in Uganda that really treasure small insects for their food. So I can see Cecilia is standing here. I think he's trying to tell me that time is up. So in the case of Chambogo, what have we done? We have been involved in AgriFoSe for some time, and we have had a number of public lectures where we invited politicians, and they challenged us to keep inviting them. So you identify your partners, advocates, those who can advocate for the work you are doing. And those public lectures were very successful. We have also agreed now to run the course of translating science into research, translating research into practice. And we're going to run this as a cross-cutting course in the university. And we've been talking to our partners in the East African region. Yesterday I was talking to Judith, who is the coordinator of this program. With time, we shall make it an online program and allow partners from Tanzania, partners from Uganda to log in and be able to participate in this training. So we hope we shall be able to make a lot of progress. But with AgriFoSe activities, the landscape is changing. There's now better appreciation of the need to use science evidence for policy making. There's now better understanding of who the policy makers are, who the stakeholders are, and with increased funding and networking, I think we are moving in the right direction. So with that, colleagues, I want to thank you very much and wish you fruitful discussions going forward.
Thank you very much, Prof. Eli. And I would like to invite Professor Mande, who is the representative of the Vice Chancellor of University of Nairobi.
Thank you very much. I feel grossly disadvantaged having listened to Professor Katunguka's stories, but more importantly, I'm happy to be here to represent the Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi. I also recognize Professor Sophia. I've not met her, but from a protocol's point of view, I would like you to note that what you're doing is important because it connects with what University of Nairobi's mandate and philosophy is all about. I would like to recognize Dr. Karugia. Every time I'm logging into a research matter, I find him. Last time we were discussing the ILRI strategy, and I believe it's still on course. I would like to recognize Professor Cecilia Onyango. Professor Cecilia is always at the front, at the forefront of these activities, and not just in Kenya, in this continent of Africa. Every time I have had a chance to represent the Vice Chancellor on this fora, she is leading this. And together, let's clap for her. And together with the others who are present in this meeting, I know that this is an international meeting and therefore represents what the Vice Chancellor and the University of Nairobi mandate is all about. We are actually in the middle of preparing the strategic plan for 2023-2027. And one of the guidelines from the government is alignment of our strategic plans to global policy, global frameworks, regional frameworks, and the national agenda. And the SDGs, in fact, the 17 of them, for the government to accept our strategic plan, we need to show specifically how SDG 1 is going to be achieved. And so today I'm happy to see that SDG 2 is fully anchored within the AgriFoSe strategy and theory of change with respect to ensuring that we are not just doing bench research, we are not just doing scientific research, which is very risky because what happens is that with the peer review articles, you cite me, I cite you, and then I cite the researcher from Europe. And so that knowledge is just circulating at the top. Then rarely do we find time to get to the politicians. The politicians have, as Dr. Karugi has said, they have a different agenda, they have a different game. To cure that, the University of Nairobi has 2 DVCs at the moment, one in charge of academic affairs. There's another one whose role is just research, innovation, and enterprise. And within that responsibility, there is a framework that has been developed not just to manage the research grants, but to ensure that even the research proposals go through a rigorous exercise of validation and ensuring then that there is very good literature review, there's very good evidence by way of systematic reviews, and then allowing that research to be seen as being translated not just from the peer review research articles, but also through the policy briefs, and then now what we are talking about today, how to influence the policymakers. And so I am very happy to also announce that we are part of ARUA. University of Nairobi is part of the Africa Research Intense University Associations. And now University of Nairobi has also signed with the European network for this alliance of universities, whose responsibility is to really ensure that we develop the researchers' capacity and incentivize them appropriately, not just through promotion, but also the administrative costs. There is a 15% administrative cost that is levied, and this is channeled back to the faculty where she belongs, the department where she belongs, and she chairs a committee that prioritizes seed money for additional research or in supporting a network such as this, or indeed facility upgrading that may be required. So AgriFoSe therefore fits very well within that framework of networking and policy making. We need to also confirm that the days of single research, single man, one man research for purpose of promotion are over. You need to demonstrate that you have a team that is around you. You need to show that you are also working with more than just Kenyans, but at the regional level you have a footprint, at the global level you have a footprint, and this is how we are going about our business with respect to research. So I confirm, therefore, that from what I have seen and heard, that there is content and there is a goodwill. And in fact, I want to just encourage that as we move along with our agenda, we will need to now just make sure that we get the politicians in such fora, such spaces. Because you see, again, we are talking Dr. Karugia. They are not here. And our technical directors are also not here. So, Sophia, I don't know. And he will tell you that their game is different. I don't know whether the breakfast meetings would work, because he narrates about his presidency. I think our presidency, and I take a risk in saying this, has embedded the value chains in agriculture in the better bottom-up economic transformation agenda. So you are to show within your research how is the dairy value chain going to be enhanced through your research? How is the poultry value chain going to be enhanced through your research? And I think it is the researchers now that we need to develop a strategy to ensure that then our technical directors in the ministries are coming along with us, so that then we are able to reach out to the MPs and the senators to help us change policy within the food security domain. With those remarks, I beg to end there, and I appreciate you all who have come, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Mande, for those words, but I still want to charge you with the responsibility of reminding our Vice-Chancellor that he promised AgriFoSe to play a key role in ensuring that what AgriFoSe has done in the past many years, University of Nairobi will take a key role in pulling together all the other universities in Kenya, but also in the region, to start building this critical mass of well-trained scientists who are going to engage with policy as well as engage with practice, so that we can change that picture that Dr. Karugia just presented. It's not an encouraging picture. And yet, as universities, Professor Eli and Professor Mande, we have a very big role to play. We cannot just sit back and say it's the politicians, because we work with the voters. We can control the vote through research. If only we understand the challenges the voters are facing, then as universities, we can use that as our entry point to at least twist these politicians. because next time they go to get the votes, the voters will say, no, you have refused to address the challenges that we are facing. You are the decision makers, and I think we can rely on the two of you to lead the institutions in Africa. Thank you very much for this. Yes, so during this session, we will get more insights from the panel on what they think about some very simple questions that I'll take them through. And we'll start with Irish. Irish, what sets the AgriFoSe model apart from other programs? What's the X factor?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, to share my observations since I joined the advisory group. So for our guest, I'm Irish Bagilat with the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development. I am an agenda coordinator. Our organization or network has 20 national farmers federation as members. So I joined the advisory group 2 years ago. So yeah, I think I can respond well to that question. And I think the activities since yesterday, I want to also pick some of the positive, the good things that I have seen so far. And yeah, I think we have seen, in the previous presentations, we've already seen the salient features of this program. And so I will try to add on to what has already been shared by Sophia and also, the second presentation. I think it's a very comprehensive description of what the program is about, the methodology and the process and the outcomes that it's trying to achieve, contributing to the global crisis that we are seriously experiencing. So I think the previous presentation has emphasized the relevance of this program, of the commitment of each and everyone involved in the program. So we have seen the global scenario. We also seen some of the strategies, which is the UN Food System Summit that I was also a part of, and the stock-taking moment as part of the advisory group of the stakeholders. So we have seen all these effort, and it's very clear how this program is very much aligned. And I think one of the key things that I want to highlight, while we have seen a lot of food systems transformation strategies, frameworks in the recent years, there's still the lack of emphasis on the welfare of smallholder farmers. So all these things are still at the back of smallholder farmers who are producing food in a changing climate, in a context where the resources are degrading. So I think I have seen the theory of change, and one of the outcome that the program has identified is the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. And I think that is one thing that we need to highlight in every framework. It's not just producing food, but it's actually the people who are producing food. And I think it's there in the theory of change of the program. And I think this is one of the things that we should highlight. I don't know how many minutes I have, but that's just the first point that I want to say. And I think it's very clear in this program how you are contributing to multi-level capacity building of actors or enablers within the system. So it has already been communicated, but I want to emphasize that for researchers, it has, and I hope it did, deepened and broadened your existing knowledge and skills, enabling you to actually reorient your research so it is linked to a meaningful outcomes for smallholder farmers and the communities who have been producing fresh, nutritious food, no, for communities and for every one of us. In Asia, 80% are still small-scale farmers. In Mekong region, if you go to the marketplace, you still see plenty of indigenous vegetables being produced, no, by small-scale farmers. So yeah, I hope, no, that the skills and knowledge that you have gained in this program will help you reorient the work that you do. And I think I have seen I have heard the testimonies from yesterday, and I think the program has contributed to the capacity development of researchers. Some of you that I have spoke with, you mentioned that this program has given you that opportunity and platform to actually practice, no, the concept of co-creation, of translating your the research into policy. So I think that's another feature that I want to emphasize. You have gained soft skills through this program to actually negotiate, have dialogue, which are the most important skills, no, for enablers and actors to have. And for farmers, I think this program allowed, no, through the platform that you have established. Some of you mentioned, although I did not see this in some of the group discussion, but at least I heard some of you have said that the platforms allowed the recognition of the indigenous local knowledge. The platform has enabled extension workers to recognize that innovation capacity, no, of the farmers, that they have, no, they have been doing it, no, even without support. They have been growing, no, improving the varieties that they actually have. So I think this is another thing that I have heard from yesterday. And for extension workers, of course, their capacities has been built also to do things differently. And we know that with the multiple factors, we have to do things differently, not the business as usual things. And I think lastly, what I want to emphasize about this program is the focus on actors, no, on people, because we are actually the one creating the change, no. The institution, they're there, but institutions are composed of people who make decisions, who actually do dialogue. So I think that's another thing that I just want to highlight. And lastly, the dynamism and openness of the framework to be enhanced and fine-tuned with the lessons that we have learned.
Thank you very much, because I pick a very critical property. I'm from the sciences, that the AgriFoSe model is adaptive and it's all inclusive, with a major focus on smallholder farmers, not only in increasing production, but also looking at their livelihoods. Thank you very much. Now we go to Paul and Notado. And we are looking at the AgriFoSe model, and then and the program as a whole, and using the translating science into policy and practice and building capacities that you have been through. How relevant is this for your work as a researcher or within your farmers' organizations and communities? I guess one of you comes from the organizations. And maybe now we go to Paul. Can we hear from you? Then we come to Lotado.
This is a very interesting question. And picking from the three presentations, it's really an intriguing question. I'm coming from Makerere University, and coming from academia, it's a nightmare to do research that informs policy. And picking from what Professor Katunguka did indicate, I remember one of the statements made by the president that how do you spend 3 years studying women? And AgriFoSe, we're talking about inclusion. He says, how do you spend 3 years studying conflict? Or how do you spend 3 years studying development studies? Or how do you spend 3 years studying human rights? These are issues that are very critical. And therefore, as AgriFoSe, we should be able to understand the policy landscape. I remember feeding into a project on understanding where the poor are across Uganda, where billions of dollars were thrown into that project. And while on a booth, we tried to show him where the poverty hotspots are across the country. And then he says, I know where the poor people are. But these were billions of dollars thrown into a project. We're also participating in a project where one of our professors, again, you spent 34 years at Makerere. I think this person spent over 40 years at Makerere. And we said, now that you are in a project which is outside the university, we need to engage with Makerere researchers so that it feeds into this project that you're implementing. And he tells us, Makerere people only do theoretical research. So it's a nightmare to do research, but we must identify the champions, which we've tried. And once we build these networks of potential policy champions, it is very, very useful. The second message I want to present is researchers, as Makerere, we must make a lot of noise. We must make noise. And the noise that we make must be very useful, very relevant, and very appropriate, not to be construed as, now this person is the opposition. And when we make useful noise, we identify particular media houses that have a geographical reach across the country. What we've done now is to work with a media house called Next Media, which has an initiative that filters, it has a national coverage, and it has joined hands with several other media houses that are at a local level. So you can sit in Kampala, speak about an issue in Karamoja through Nation Media. It will give the message where it is most relevant. So those two critical issues are very relevant for me. Thank you so much.
Just to get back to you, you have highlighted all these challenges. Then can you just give us a quick view of how AgriFoSe as a program has actually enabled the researchers in Makerere go around these challenges that you've clearly highlighted?
AgriFoSe program has given us an opportunity to explore several working relationships that we've developed, but we've been able to build more of these networks with several stakeholders that identify with the work that we're doing. And we are making entry points to community groups, we are making entry points to district local governments, we're making entry points to politicians, including members of parliament, but several other groups, including researchers as well. So that opportunity and the flexibility that you can move across several other communities of practice, several epistemic communities, that has been very, very useful for us, the flexibility that we can work with several actors.
Thank you very much, and I did not forget you. But now I would like you to at least tell us what you can talk of as practical changes that have taken place in your project that were really facilitated by the AgriFoSe program model.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I work as a researcher, and I'm coming from university, Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. So in my experience, having worked as a researcher for many years, you find out that there is a lot of research that goes around in universities. But the big question is, where does this research end up in? Who is it impacting? Is it making any difference? And oftentimes, you find out that there is work that is going on and there is publications that are produced within the university spaces each year. But outside there is no impact. I think one unique thing about AgriFoSe is that it embeds a development component. So it's not only research, but it's research that aims to bring about change. And in our instance, on the project that I was working on, which was to promote sorghum and cowpea crops in South African smallholder farming systems that are hugely maize-based systems, and we're trying to introduce or to promote the diversification of crop choices. With sorghum being produced, the farmers that we worked with had some sorghum to sell, and that in turn resulted in them having some income coming into their pockets. And after selling this sorghum from a company that we linked them to, which adds value to the sorghum by through the manufacture of what they call sorghum pops, the farmers then used the proceeds from the sale of their sorghum to fence a cooperative field on which they are working on as a group. So that is one tangible difference that change that we can talk about in our project. But we can also talk about the linkages that we have established, the stakeholders that we have managed to link these farmers to, who are very crucial in their development and capacitation. And also we created a platform for dialogue such that different stakeholders can come together to dialogue and co-create solutions to problems that they face. Because the problems that farmers face are not only the biophysical ones, but there are a lot of socio-economic factors that affect them, and that need addressing first before we even talk about improving the productivity issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Notodo, but I'm not releasing you soon. I just want to hear from you and also Paul, if there were any unintended changes that happened, this is not what you're looking for, but changes happened, and what are those? If you can just tell us unintended changes that occurred during this process. Maybe we give her a few minutes, or do you want to go first? Yeah.
Several unintended changes during the implementation of our project. One is we didn't expect that one municipality would commit funding, because municipalities and district local governments have a budgeting conference which involves several actors. And urban agriculture for a long time has not been recognized within urban settings. But through our project, the unintended change that we saw in the municipality, Kasese municipality, was that there was a commitment to devote a share of their annual budget to promoting smallholders within the municipality. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Anything? Our project only began last year, so we've only been able to implement it in a very short space of time. So I'm pretty sure had we had a longer period, we could have been reporting a lot of positive changes, but there are a lot of positives that were intended, but the one that stands out that was unintended, but that came about nonetheless, is when we had an issue with the farmers that we are working with in Mpumalanga province. Remember, we are promoting sorghum and cowpea, which are field crops, but these farmers are also involved in fresh produce, which is vegetables, and they were saying that they were struggling to get into the formal markets because they were saying that it's a requirement that they should provide water use licenses for them to be able to for the formal markets to even start recognizing them. And from the platforms, I think we gave the farmers a voice and the encouragement to say that you can stand up for yourselves and you can get things done if you work together. So these farmers, we encouraged them to come together and select representatives to go and find out exactly what this requirement entails. And upon arriving at the offices, they were actually told that if you are farming on a piece of land that is less than 5 hectares, then you don't necessarily have to provide that water use license. So now these farmers are free to approach the bigger markets that they all aspire to sell to. And this came about as a result of the dialogue that AgriFoSe facilitated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now you can appreciate them. Because what they have done is to add some spice to the morning discussions. Thank you very much. Can I have this? At this point, we want to close this session, and we are going to invite a very special guest to give us the closing remarks. And this is Oka Akeson, the lead policy specialist, environment and climate change, working with CEDA. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for excellent contributions to this morning's session. I think it's been very interesting for me. And I would just like to say some words about our support to AgriFoSe. So as you all know, AgriFoSe is an appreciated and praised cooperation for us at CEDA, for Sweden. And I think we've heard that the program strives to assist the bridging between science and research to policy and implementation. And this task, I think, is often called science outreach, and it's a real challenge in most of countries, as we also have heard this morning. And also, I think with all the challenges we have in agriculture related to climate change, to biodiversity loss, and so forth, it is very, very important that all knowledge that could facilitate methods leading to sustainable, resilient production methods can also contribute to poverty alleviation and better food security. And it could also be translated to the producers. And that, I think, also we heard of this morning. In line with and in support of what I just mentioned, the embassy here in Nairobi, where I am based, is starting a 4-year program with the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development that focuses on the development of business along the nodes of selected priority agriculture value chains. And it's called the Kenya Agriculture Business Development Project, running 2024 to 2027. And this program aims to improve incomes among value chain actors, men, women, youth, and thus reduce poverty and create additional jobs and increase food and nutrition security while ensuring environmental sustainability through climate-smart agriculture and climate resilience approaches. And I also wanted to mention this because this program setup comprises action to build on action research results through provision of climate information services, seed propagators, soil testing, etc., and link to the value chains to leverage best practice. But coming back to the overarching perspective and also why Sweden and CEDA are supporting this important work that we all talk about today, is that many stakeholders need to take their part of the responsibility in bridging between science and research to policy and implementation. And universities need to give sufficient priority and allow resources for this task, and so that researchers would be given credit and positive merit for work on science outreach. Politicians and decision makers should base their decisions on scientific evidence. And practitioners should, through extension services, etc., get access to best sustainable practices for implementation on the ground. Here, good policy briefs with adequate and convincing communication plans is a good start, but we also need collaboration platforms and opportunities. And SIDA has developed a paper called Support to Innovation and Innovation Systems within the framework of Swedish Research Cooperation, taking stock, lessons learned, and the way ahead, which could give some good inspiration here, I think. And I would like to end these concluding remarks with a question that I think we all have to think about. And that is how the lessons learned from AgriFoSe can be spread. How can other programs learn from this program? I think we all need to get our head around that and think more of that going ahead. And let us all be part of the change and contribute to the process going forward. And I think today has been one part in the process of doing so. So many thanks to everyone.